All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. When the New York Mets decided to move on from manager Buck Showalter following their disappointing season, you saw the writing on the wall. And I say this because the Mets had just named David Stearns as their new president of baseball operations. And prior to joining the Mets front office, Stearns had been the longtime general manager of the Milwaukee Brewers. The conventional wisdom was that for the Mets was that since Stearns didn't hire Showalter, that he was going to bring in his guy to be the manager, and that guy appeared to be Craig Counsell, who had spent the last 9 years as a manager of the Milwaukee Brewers. Now, since parting with Showalter, the Mets did interview Counsell while he was also being courted by the Cleveland Guardians as they were looking to replace Terry Francona. But little did we know that the Cubs were also in on Counsell, and they hired him yesterday to be their new skipper. Now, Counsell's hire in Chicago took so many weird twists and turns as the Cubs appeared to be committed to manager David Ross. As team owner Tom Ricketts was quoted last month as saying he's our guy in regards to Ross. Now, since then, the Guardians, they've hired former MLB player Stephen Vogt to be their manager, while the Brewers are now left to find a new skipper as well. And after missing out on Counsell, the Mets made their pivot as they hired New York Yankees bench coach Carlos Mendoza to be their next manager. Now, Mendoza has spent the last several years on Aaron Boone's staff with the Yankees, and he has experience at the minor league level, but not previously as a skipper in the big leagues. Now, to me, the Mets were in a no-win situation on this matter. And I say that because Counsell was Stearns' guy from the jump. But Counsell, in my opinion, and that opinion of others, didn't want any parts of the Big Apple as it looked like it was going to be Milwaukee, and then Chicago just came out of nowhere. Now, Stearns didn't hire Showalter either, like I said before. But now, if you're the Mets, you've moved on from an experienced manager in Showalter that will definitely end up in Cooperstown one day in order to get the inexperienced guy that was not your first choice. Now, for the Mets, it has not been a pretty offseason so far. Remember, right after they hired Stearns, it looked like he was going to be lock and key with general manager Billy Epler for the Mets, only to have Epler to resign after a scandal broke. Now, Mets team owner Steve Cohen over the last couple of years, he's been trying to change the narrative of this team, trying to change the culture, showing the fan base that he's willing to go out there and spend money. But honestly, and I hate to say it, the more that Cohen tries, it's still the same old song for the Mets. I mean, you still have this calamity of issues with the Mets that plagued them during the tenure of the Wilpons as the team owners. And now, unfortunately for Cohen, it's carried over to his watch. He's gone out there and tried to spend the money. And we saw the calamity of errors that this past season was for the Mets in that regard. Now, even before, he tried to come in and find his guy to be the GM, and he couldn't. Well, a lot of people that he wanted, he was denied permission to interview those people before. Now you bring in Stearns, and it looked like you finally had your front office for Stearns and Epler, and then of course Epler had to resign, and now this. So it's just like, to me, with the Mets, and you hate to say this, you take one step forward and you're taking 5 steps backwards. That's what it appears to be right now. So, I mean, obviously, one of the questions is going to be for the Mets was firing Showalter the right move? And for me, only time is going to tell, because you want to say, well, that Showalter should have gotten, more time, especially with how the Mets overachieved in 2022 compared to how they underachieved here in 2023. But at the end of the day, like I said before, Showalter was not a Stearns hire. So that from that part of it, I understand it. But the other question is going to be for the Mets, is Mendoza going to be the right guy? We got to wait and see. I mean, he comes from the Boone family tree, if you will, as far as coaching. So it's going to be heavy on analytics. This is something that the Mets want to, navigate towards anyway. And of course, David Stearns during his time in Milwaukee, he was big on analytics as well. So we have to wait and see how that's going to play out. But I will say one thing about this whole Craig Counsell saga, if you will. This just adds a new twist to the rivalry in the National League Central between the Brewers and Cubs. There was already a rivalry there between Milwaukee and Chicago, of course, due to their close proximity to one another. They're division rivals. Heck, it's Big Ten country. When you peel back the surface and look at it, and of course, the Cubs are the big market team, if you will, from that division, and of course, the Brewers are one of the smaller market teams in all of Major League Baseball. And, it's one of those where Brewers ownership, they were willing to spend the money to keep Craig Counsell. So that wasn't the issue. He got 5 years, $40 million from the Chicago Cubs. I just think at the end of the day, he just needed a new change of scenery. And again, like I said, I really don't think it was going to be New York because being in Milwaukee and being in New York are two different things. Heck, being in Milwaukee and being in Chicago are two different things. But being in Chicago and being in New York are two different things as well, because the fact that you came in, for the sake of argument, if your counsel coming to New York to manage the Mets, the expectations were going to be through the roof because let's not forget, Cohen has shown that he's willing to spend money. He spent money last offseason. You better believe that Steve Cohen is going to spend some more money this offseason to try to go out there and get some free agents. And I mean, Council has had success with Milwaukee. You figure 5 of the last 6 years have ended with the Brewers making the postseason, but with the exception of 2018, Milwaukee has not gotten past the divisional round. So, with that said, you come to New York, you come to the Mets with this high payroll. The expectations are going to be there. Don't get me wrong; the expectations are still going to be there for Carlos Mendoza. But I'm just saying, if you're already an established manager like Council, I think you don't have to worry about that pressure. I think that the Cubs this year under David Ross did overachieve slightly. They're going to go out there and spend money as well, and it's going to be interesting to see how that situation works out there for Council. Remember, there's going to be some pressure on Craig Council as well because this team in the Cubs, they showed a lot of potential and a lot of improvement this year under David Ross. And that's why conventional wisdom made you think, okay, they're going to keep going forward with David Ross, which was a huge shock when the Cubs decided to fire Ross and go with Craig Counsell. So it's going to be interesting to see who the Brewers hire to replace Craig Counsell. Maybe they hire, promote from within and go forward there. But like I said, this just adds an interesting twist to that rivalry in the Central between the Cubs and Brewers. So Craig Counsell has a new baseball home. It's not what a lot of people expected it to be, but nonetheless, that's the nature of the beast. David Ross is looking for a job, and that's also the nature of the beast as well as it's a business. Your boss will tell you one thing one day, and the next day have a totally different outlook on things, as David Ross unfortunately had to find out from the managerial aspect. I'm certainly that he understood that from the players aspect as well, because as a player, you're told that you're going to be that the team is going to be committed to you. And if you don't have that no trade clause, guess what? You can get traded. But nonetheless, Council is in Chicago. The Mets had to go with Mendoza. The Guardians had to go with Stephen Vogt. And now Milwaukee's looking for a manager as things have already gotten interested heading into the 2024 season. And we haven't even reached the winter meetings as of yet. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now, you can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.